Next up, we have another trailblazer joining us, a pivotal figure in Omani sports. The upcoming speaker has achieved significant milestones, transforming his childhood passion into a speedy career. Please join me in welcoming Ahmed Al Harthy to the stage.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في البداية نبغى نرحب فيكم في سلطنة عمان بلدكم الثاني، وإن شاء الله يعني نورتوا المكان بكل أمانة. وإذا تسمحوا لي بتكلم في لغة المحركات شوية باللغة الإنجليزية. I was just saying welcome to everybody to Oman, and it's a pleasure to have you all with us. I'm extremely delighted to be able to talk about a bit about my profession. There were some amazing synergies that I've heard early on. Plus, you know, it was an honor to hear Ali speak. Ali and I go back many, many years, alhamdulillah, and I learned a lot from him. In a parallel world, I think I'll be here upstage talking about finance and accounting. And hopefully, maybe my success story, hopefully, in the world of auditing and becoming a partner in one of the top firms. Because that's where I started. I graduated in finance and accounting, and I was working as an external auditor. And today I'm up here talking about motorsport. So I'm sure everybody wants to know what's the link and what's the exciting difference. And I think that was, for me, a serendipity moment, to be honest. Getting a phone call in 2005, from a friend of mine saying, Ahmed, I'd like you to race in Bahrain. I'd like you to come go-kart racing with you. He knew I was a go-kart and I used to go-kart a lot. And I said, what do you mean? We've never had a Omani team go and race in Bahrain for go-karting. And he told me, if you're able to do it, please come. In long story, I mean, they've given me 10 minutes to talk about my 18, 19 years of motorsport. So I'll try and be as fast as I can, hopefully as fast as in the racetrack. I accepted that phone call. We went to Bahrain. We raced. And I was spotted. And they invited me to the Bahrain International Circuit, which was a very, very new sport to the Middle East and the region. And I got an opportunity, and I was working side by side with being an auditor and starting a hobby initially as we started. But a few years into that, I had a very serious conversation with my partner at Ernst & Young at that time. And I said, I personally don't feel I'm giving you 100% to what I'm doing as an external auditor or to my racing project that I was starting to build. And he told me, Ahmed, take a year off and come back to me and let me know your job is still here for you. And alhamdulillah, that was over 18 years ago. I never went back. How did it all start? It started by me becoming the first circuit racer from Oman. And what we do, as you see, is behind the screens. We circuit race. It's different from rallying. It's different from Formula One. It's a different version of racing. So I started in 2006 in Bahrain. I then graduated to Formula Renault for 3 years. That was the university. That was the education period of mine. As Dr. Mohammed earlier said, there's a very strong parallel between university life and working life. And for me, I was learning that through motorsports. And what did that mean exactly? That meant that I had to go and do the correct foundation, which was Formula Renault. That was a championship. Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton had graduated from the past. So it was my job to go and try and race in a junior category. 3 years, I raced around drivers around the world, and I became the first Arab to score a point in that championship initially. And I graduated from that as a vice champion. I then moved to one of the most difficult championships in the world. Why was it difficult? Because the engine was in the wrong place of the car. So I think some of you can guess that's in a Porsche. And I graduated as the first Arab champion in the Pro-Am category in the UK, in Britain. And then I said, what's next? Ali talked about, you know, his coach. We call him Buji, yeah? Who spotted him? I had a spotter, and he told me, Ahmed, you need to go to the world of endurance racing. Your driving, your ideas, your way of thinking is all long-term. It's planning. And you should not waste your time in open wheelers. You should go to the endurance world, which meant 2 hours of racing, 4 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, and the big 24-hour races that you all know about. So I graduated in 2014. I became the first Arab Aston Martin driver at that time, alhamdulillah. I stayed with them for many years, and we kept graduating and going up and up in classes in different categories. But one of the most important things that I felt was important was to teach ourselves not to run before we know how to walk. And through these championships and through all that time we spent learning and educating ourselves was very important to try and break barriers. Breaking the barriers were Arab drivers being in a sport that wasn't even known about. So rewinding and coming back, after I had obviously graduated from finance and accounting, started working, and me going to my parents explaining to them that I want to become a professional race driver. And the hardest two individuals was my father, Allah yarahmah, and my mother, to explain to them that this is what I want to do. And how do I explain to them? Everybody sees this as a dangerous sport. So I remember sitting down on the table and explaining to them, how many people do you see driving a car wearing a helmet? How many people do you see on the phones? Or how many people do you see turning on each other, crossing the road? So I was slowly trying to educate them from an educational point of view, what we do as professional racing drivers. And that kept going, and it kept working gently. But the person who really pushed was, in a way, it was an opposite scenario from Ali's story, where my father was the one who made my mom accept it. And I started racing, and she would receive phone calls from family members who would explain, what are you doing to your child? How do you allow them? How are you allowing him to put himself in this situation? Now these are the same people who message me directly congratulating me on my achievements, alhamdulillah. So time has changed, but time through education is very important. So how did we create something called Oman Racing and Ahmed Al Harthy Racing Abroad? I treated it as an SME at that point of time. I treated it as a private company trying to break barriers and trying to fight barriers. And the biggest barriers that I found was not on the racetrack, was actually off the racetrack. The hardest ones was, how do I convince people in Oman here about what I do? We don't race here, we don't have racetracks. I want to go and I want to fight and punch above my weights internationally. So I was able to, alhamdulillah, sit down, explain to them. And at that time, one of the key speakers from yesterday was Ma'ali Sheikh Dr. Ali Saud Sinedi. He was my Minister of Sports at that time. And I explained to him and I said, I want to create something in Oman. Our neighbors have racetracks, but they don't have drivers. Why don't we focus on the driving side of things, the driver side? So he agreed, alhamdulillah, and we started to create a program that we were able to gently move up and up into the world of motorsports. And I think one of the hardest things for me to learn was to go and live abroad. And there was a story that I will always remember. Ali, myself, were one of the few Omani professionals racing, for me, competing in the Premiership for Ali, was outside Oman. We were in competitions and championships that didn't exist locally. They actually existed internationally. So one race was in Manchester. And through a friend, I got Ali's number and I said, Ali, I'd like to come and see you, and I'm racing in Manchester. And I'd love for you to come and watch me race. He's like, Ahmed, I'm sorry, but I have my football going on. But I passed by his house and I sat with him and he invited me and we had lunch together. And I was learning the stories that today he's here, but in other speeches and conferences, I use him as one of my motivators, one of my mentors, because I've been to Ali's place many times. And I saw Ali when he was being on the bench for me, unjustified being on the bench, and Ali told me the coach will let me play when he believes in that, and I'm ready for that time to wait. And I've also seen Ali progress, and I visited him when he invited me to the FA Cup finals. I was with him at the same time, but at his highest, and his demeanor did not change when he was on the bench or when he was playing first team. And that was something that I learned and I was really humbled about. And I tried to apply it in the world of motorsports. So climbing and finding out the new, every year was a challenge. I remember when I moved from sprint races to endurance races, I used to race for 20, 25 minutes, and then all of a sudden we were racing for 1 hour, 2 hours, and from one driver to teammates. Now I have to work with people. Now I see my car going around with other drivers. So all of a sudden teamwork was starting to become a major factor in my project. And how do we work with people sometimes we are friendly with, and sometimes they are not actually our best friends. But for the love of the sport and the love of the game and the professionalism, we have to work and gel together. And I remember that there were so many times when we as a team are in charge of making sure there's harmony and making sure that every single individual works with one another. So one of the biggest points in endurance racing is driver changes. So I came out from the Porsche days of 20 minutes, and all of a sudden they told me, Ahmed, you need to jump into the car next. And I'm like, I jump into the car, we do the simulation, and I come out and they said, we clocked it on the time, and they said, that was 1 minute. And I was like, wow, I've done a driver change in 60 seconds. And they're like, what are you celebrating? The team next door did it in 27 seconds. And in my mind, that was impossible. There is no way. Now we do it in 22 seconds. And so it's not about not being able to do something, it's about working hard towards it. I remember we sat down with my teammates, and a right buckle or a left buckle first can save you 1 second. As minor as that was, it was something we learned from. Today, alhamdulillah, we compete in one of the biggest championships in the world. Today I'm a BMW driver. Today I race side by side with Valentino Rossi in the World Endurance Championship, someone I looked up to, and I said there's no chance I'll ever get to meet him. But today he's my teammate. Today we race with OQ by Oman Racing. Today we won. We're the winners of the Monza race, the outright race. I race in different categories. You know, I race in a bronze category, which is defined by drivers. But Oman Racing with OQ won the entire race at Monza, which we created history with, and till date people talk about it. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. We just got back from Jeddah in Saudi, a racetrack that was only open for F1. We raced there in endurance of nearly 50 cars, and we finished second in our class, alhamdulillah. So it's a major, for me, it is about the obstacles we face as individuals. You know, for me having that conversation with my parents, or me having the conversation about becoming an endurance driver. I know the same way Ali was spotted, I was spotted by someone who said and believed in me. It's about turning that into a professional. You know, people ask me, is it still a hobby? And the answer is no, the hobby died 18 years ago. It's, you know, it's something that we believe in, and it has allowed us to, I mean, if you ask me when I was an external auditor, when I first graduated, what's your 5-year plan? I would have gone and said, I have no idea what I'm doing tomorrow. You know, there's no chance you can ask me this question. Today you ask me in the world of motorsport, we're building and planning. There's a lot of movement, a lot of speed with our competitors. We win a race, we come back to the drawing boards and says, how can we go quicker? Our competitors will be there and they'll be stronger than us. You know, we finish, we go into new challenges like what you face every day, either in university life, either being in the normal work fields where you have competitors. How do we learn the new rules? How do we modify ourselves as drivers? Today we have sustainability in our racing. You know, today we race with sustainable fuel. Today we race with sustainable tires. And when you mentioned, you know, about the Goodyear, I laughed because it's one of the hardest tires to race with. But in terms of how do we adapt to the new changes and how do we adapt to the new barriers of entry, as one can call it. But we as Arabs are able to do that. We as Arabs are able to compete. One of the most important things that when I first started was I used to race and I used to see, all right, there's an Arab driver, but there's no support from the entities around them. And then the other example was, oh, we have an Arab team with no Arab drivers in it. And I said, this does not make sense at all. So when I first started, I really wanted to make sure that we have an Arab driver in an Arab flag racing with Arab sponsorship. And alhamdulillah, we were able to achieve that. And this is one of the foundations that I've always tried to work for. And in the past, I used to always say, I'm the first and only Omani for many years. But today I'm saying I'm the first and I'm not the only Omani in this. And I'm extremely proud about that, alhamdulillah. And I will also say is that, we take risks. And the doctor also told me about what are these risks. They're calculated risks. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And we have to learn from it. And I'm sure Ali was with us in Monza and he saw things that we've never seen in our past. And I hope that, we learn from that and we've adapted to it as well. So I always say, whatever is it that you want to do, there's no problem being the first one at it. But the most important thing is that you have to give 100% of your time, your effort. And to make sure you're able to succeed, it's very important to have Rida al-Walidain as well. They are the ones who back you in the end. And hopefully we can all achieve bigger and greater results in the future, inshallah.
And now we're going to have a discussion session moderated by GPCA's Youth Council member, Dalal AlHooli.
Thank you so much, Ahmad, and thank you, Ahmed, for your inspiring session. I'm sure everyone is as inspired as I am, especially when you touched about your passion, overcoming challenges. I'm pretty sure everyone can reflect on those even when they're overcoming challenges in their own careers, in their own field. I want to start this session by touching on your early career and motivation. I know you've already mentioned that it's not a hobby anymore, but what actually inspired you to take it from a hobby into actually pursuing it into a profession?
That's a really good question because for me it was important to be 100% at something you do. So it's funny how the undergrads of finance and accounting taught me one side of how to create a program in racing. But the other side was about how do I become a professional in what I do myself. So I had to focus on developing myself, educating myself, testing, making sure that I'm able to, I would say, go to the right places. Because if we chose two programs at that time in 2007, there was a program to go to the UK and there was a program to go to Asia. Asia had 6 or 7 cars and we'd be on the podiums and we'd be celebrating a lot. The UK was the hard bit, 30 cars, drivers from around the world. I wanted to better myself, and to become a professional, I didn't want to take any shortcuts. Because I know in this game, in this sport, time is of essence. And for me to be able to really try and do it right, I had to become a professional in it. So today, those were the important calls that I felt. And I think one of the things which we learned a lot was racing in the best championships in the world. Ali played in the strongest premiership teams in the world, and for us was similar in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Especially racing, as you said, with Valentino Rossi, the legendary Valentino. Yeah. But I know you spoke briefly about Le Mans race, but can you reflect on that or any other instance where you faced significant setbacks, and how did you actually overcome those setbacks?
So, Le Mans last year was my first ever 24 hours. And alhamdulillah, we competed as the Oman team and we finished second in this championship, in the championship race of Le Mans. That itself was one of the biggest achievements I achieved on the racetrack. The setbacks we had in 24 hours of racing at Le Mans was unbelievable. We qualified as the second car. I qualified the car, alhamdulillah. Unfortunately, when we went out, so what happens in Le Mans is a very interesting race. No one really shows their real speed until the race happens itself. And that's part of the strategy. So we went out, and on the first lap, we realized that we are way slower than everybody else. And we were looking pretty reasonable all the time. And I can see my engineers all holding their heads up and said, we are slow. But he was not referring to Aston Martin when I was racing with them. He was referring to our car. I said, how are we slower than our sister cars? He said, it looks like we have a data malfunction with software. And what do? We have to do a reset. And for that reset, it takes 60 seconds. So in the beginning of the race, the first lap, we're in the pits, and we're downloading a new software onto the car. So we were the last. And we kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And it was one of the perfect races we have achieved as a team. Every tire change is not like a Formula One race. Every tire change is between 2 or 4 people. We don't have 25 people surrounding a car. And each one was perfect. And we didn't lose a single second in any of these for 24 stops. We had the team with the least stops. And the best result was second for us. To me, it's a win. It was during 100 years of Le Mans, 450,000 people at the racetracks. So it was something that I still get goosebumps thinking of it. But it's more of, I think, it's not done overnight. It's that professionalism that you talked about from the beginning. We learned from these mistakes and we learned from trials. We learned how to, I remember in 2006 when I first started racing, I had a really small accident in Bahrain. And I went home and I was depressed for 3 days. And I remember my mom telling me, if this is how you're going to be, I don't think you should be a racing driver. And I snapped out of it the next day. And that's what it's about. It's how do you lift yourselves as individuals, as people who work in very tough scenarios. How do you lift yourself when things go not your way? And that's something we've taught ourselves in the sport as well.
Yeah, that's actually the second question that I wanted to ask. Like during such situations, what strategies do you employ to maintain focus, especially during high pressure situations on the track?
Yeah, you should always, we always believe that we could get better results whenever we work together in a more professional way. Incidents which cause problems sometimes, we have to learn from these mistakes as a team. As a driver, the best thing is to go back onto the race car as fast as you can. I think if you do not learn from every downfall in a way, sometimes finishing second is not enough. You want to win it. So if you learn from that, I think that is one of the most important things in this sport.
That's a very nice message, especially for young professionals and newly graduates. So what other ways that can young professionals adopt? How can they adopt like a racer's mindset in order to excel in their careers?
I think, everybody in whatever field they go to, it's very important for them to give it 100%. And if you don't give it 100%, then you know that you're not going to achieve what you're here for. We travel thousands of kilometers. We travel to different parts of the world. We travel to circuits that we've never raced on. This year I've raced from Japan to Brazil. Challenges that we never faced before in different mindsets, in different ways. I think the most important thing for us is to make sure that when we are racing and when we are able to go there and achieve the best in terms of the simulations that we do, making sure that everything comes back the right way. I think mainly for the youth and mainly for everybody involved is that there is light in the end of the tunnel. I've been to meetings where I was told that there is no way that we are interested in this program. I remember going to one of my longest and biggest sponsors at one time. They were with me for more than 10 years. And she's like, Ahmed, I know who you are, but I don't believe in what you do. And you have 10 minutes to pitch it to me. And I left that meeting, educating her in a different mindset of it's not just about speed and recklessness, it's about professionalism and working together. So sometimes it's very important for you to realize that the person you're speaking to, sometimes you have to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're looking at it from which angle. And, alhamdulillah, today, they've been with me for many, many years in the past, but it's not about that scenario, but it's more than one scenario. There are times when the doors were shut on me. I mean, there was no chance. It was the lowest period of my time off the racetrack. And then I realized, why am I still trying to open that door while there's another door right there waiting for me to go and experience and try? And so I think us as individuals, us as youths around us as well, will always have these challenges. But what I've seen, and it's very disturbing at points, is people give up at the first barrier, at the first hurdle. You know, we as sports people, Ali will not share all his negative stories. It doesn't benefit anyone, you know, to go out to the media and be negative about it. Because the people who are watching you are the ones who want to see your success. The ones who really want to understand you, people such as here, want to know the hurdles you have. So it's not all glamour. There is a lot of hard work that happens behind the scenes. We have to make sure that the youth, the business starters as well, have to realize it's very, very difficult, but when things go right, it works well, inshallah.
And you've mentioned that racing often involves a lot of teamwork, but how do you actually maintain effective teamwork and communication with your team, especially during the 24-hour races?
Yeah, I think my engineers will be the best one to see or hear my high-pitched notes when I'm in the race car. So we work as a team. We have about 25, 26 people working around one car, and I think everyone's role is very important. But my job in the car is very, very simple. It is to drive the fastest you can for the longest amount of time you have. And sometimes you have to believe in the strategies, you have to believe in the teamwork that comes to you across. Sometimes I don't even know which position I am. You know, it's not our job to know where we are sometimes. And when we are in the pits, for example, when we do the driver changes, when we do the fueling, we are in a controlled, dangerous environment. The last thing we want to do is ever come into the pits as a team or as a racing driver. That is when, if I'm speeding by 1 kilometer, I get a fine of hundreds and hundreds of riyals just for 1 kilometer. If I do anything wrong as a team as well, we as a team lose. An individual changing a tire makes a mistake. We can never recover that 1 second. So all these scenarios and protocols, we have practiced the driver change this year more than 50 times. You know, and we've been doing this every day, day in, day out. But we still practice, and we have a session of practice because we still want to make sure. There was a good story when I was racing in Spa 24. Spa is a very famous racetrack in Belgium. And it was maybe my 6th time going into the car. And me being one of the smallest drivers, I always have what you call a baby seat. It's built around me that I put into my seat, and it's a booster. So I was talking to my engineer, and I was asking him, I was like, and this is my 6th time in the car. I was like, do you put it in or do I put it in? It's something that I just generally blanked out in the middle of the race, and I forgot. And he looked at me and was like, it's you, don't worry. So sometimes, if I didn't want to ask that question because I was shy or because I felt it was not appropriate, we could have lost time together. So sometimes it's ask the questions. You've got people in this room who've got so much years of experience. They've done so much for their companies, for their countries, and learn from them. You know, I've learned as much as I could from Ali. He was in a completely different sport, and now I hope he plays paddle more now after retirement. But I've learned from so many people in different fields what is the right move and what is the right place. It's because things change so fast. So take that knowledge and use it, I would suggest, from the people who've been in this industry.
So speaking of changes that are happening, especially you've just mentioned the sustainability integration into the racing world. So how do you maintain continuous improvement and continuous learning, especially in racing?
One of the hardest things is these Goodyear tires, you know. Racing, so sustainability for us is, for example, we are now limited to the number of tires that we can race on a race weekend. So all of a sudden, for me, instead of using a tire for 1 hour, I'm asked to use a tire for 2 hours and 2 hours plus. So your driving standards and styles have to change according to that side of things. But more importantly, it's the fatigue, the mental tiredness as well. When I first came into the sport, I was realizing our job is to race, and why are we so interested in physique and physical fitness and so on? And then I realized when I was in the UK how everybody trained, and I started training towards that as well. Today I can tell you, but this is just between us, my heart rate in a race can go up to 170 for 2 hours straight, and we will be burning over 1,200 calories in one stint. People really think, how is that possible? The amount of G-force that we go through, the amount of... Ali saw me come out of a car. He's seen what we go through. So those high, I would say, intensity, high you know, blood rush adrenaline, and you have to make decisions based on the drivers and the cars around you as well. This is when you are at the highest level of concentration. So what we do is we try and mimic it, and we can't be in a car every day practicing. We try and mimic it from other sports and try and put ourselves in those positions and making those decisions. And that's something that really has helped us. I remember one of my trainers told me, Ahmed, are you able to do a lap around the circuit? I remember it was Brands Hatch in the UK. Can you do that with your eyes closed? Do that when you just, before going to bed and waking up. I said, yeah, I can do that, obviously. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. He's like, no, now I want you to do it with a timer and come as close as you can to your lap time. I was never able to come within 5 seconds, but that just shows you the level of professionalism and how deep people go into the sport. I can talk to you about tires and rubber and you know, the uses of tires for more than 1 hour. It's one of the most important things. But I think we only have a few minutes
Yeah,
left.
I know. I've been seeing the time. This has been very engaging. But if we were to leave the audience with one final message to help them succeed in their own races toward their own goals, what would that be?
I would always suggest, and you know, believe in yourselves. Keep dreaming big. Make sure that you always are able to follow those dreams, those realistic dreams. And for me personally, I agree with Ali 100%. You know, it's Rada al-Walidain who will give you that extra push and that trust, and always educate the public about what you do.
All right. Thank you so much, Ali, for your time, and thank you for this session. Thank you for everyone for listening up. I think Dr. Sadun has a question. Oh.
بناء على اللي سمعناه من علي الحبسي، رغم انه هلالي لا والحارثي، يعني شكرا لكم على الاثنين، يعني تجربتهم، ولكم يا شباب وشابات. بلادنا ولاده، والنجاح ما هو بسهل، لكن الوصول له إذا كان في توفيق من الله سبحانه وتعالى أولا وأخيرا، وبعدين الهمة. ويمكن شفتوا الفيديو اللي عرضناه في الليلة الأولى اللي في بيت شعر لأبو القاسم الشابي: ومن يتهيب صعود الجبال يعيش أبد الدهر بين الحفر. النجاح يحتاج مواظبة، يحتاج جهد، يحتاج رؤية، يحتاج إيمان بقدراتكم، وأنتم كلكم فيكم خير وبركة. لكن الواحد لابد يبذل جهد، لابد يقدم أفضل ما عنده. وبلادنا إن شاء الله، يعني أنا ختمتها بكلمة غازي القصيبي الله يغفر له: طموحاتنا كبيرة بصراحة، ولا نقبل بأقل من المركز الأول في كل شيء. وأنتم كشباب إذا رضيتوا بالمركز الثاني ما حد يذكركم، ترى المركز الأول هو اللي يذكر. من اللي فاز ببطولة كأس العالم، كأس آسيا الأخيرة؟ قطر. الثاني مين؟ ما حد يدري. أنا أعرف طبعا، بس ماني قايل. علي الحبسي يعرف. فشكرا للجميع، شكرا للمبدعين. الحارثي أبدعت، الحبسي رغم أنك هلالي أبدعت. شكرا مرة ثانية، والله يوفقكم مزيد من النجاحات إن شاء الله.
بارك الله فيك.
Thank you so much.